Chometz U'Matzah Perek Vav Halacha Zayin. Einon miyotzi lechvosi b'Hilchos Matzah shiur. A person cannot fulfill his obligation in eating matzah, which is forbidden to him. Let's go down to the Peirush. What does it mean? Keep going. The Rambam continues. She'ochal, he ate matzah of tevel. Tevel is before you've taken Chometz and Maisus, and therefore it's forbidden to be eaten. Or even that which you give to a Levi, which is the first tenth after you've taken off the Truma Gedolah, has to have Truma taken from it. And Rae Gann explains that even though he did Ma'aser Rishon, the Levi has to take Truma's Ma'aser of the Kohen. If not, it's also Ba'achilo. And furthermore, if he didn't take off Truma Gedolah before the Levi got his Ma'aser Rishon, then there too there's a problem that you have to take Truma Gedolah. Oishe Gozlo, or you stole the matzah from somebody else. Ze'aklal, this is the general rule. Kol shemevochen olav birchas hamozoin, yoytze bo yidei chavosoi. Anything you are permitted to make a bracha of birchas hamozoin after that eating, therefore is worthy of being used for matzah. Kol shemevochen olav birchas hamozoin, according to the Rambam's opinion, that anything that's forbidden to be eaten, you don't make a birchas hamozoin, ein yoytze bo yidei chavosoi. You do not fulfill your obligation. The Magen Mishnah explains that the Rambam said it short, and he says this is our klal. This is the rule, so that he won't have to go on what he said in the Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah, Sochem 35a, and you yoytze bit mai. What's mai? This is wheat that was brought, or flour that was brought from a non-learned person, and it's called mai. Meaning, we're not sure whether he took ma'aser from it. A mazeh, what is it? We don't know if the Amoritz took ma'aser. The Chacham required you to take Chometz and Ma'aseres. If you eat it and you didn't separate Ma'aseres, you're yoytze yidei choyve, because only the Rabbanon, and the Chacham did not take away the obligation of saying birchas hamazon on it. Now the Mishnah continues there, that one can fulfill his obligation that it's possible that the Levi was given the Ma'ases and he took Trumas Ma'ases to the Kohen, and now the Ma'aser Rishon is mutar ba'achila even for Yisrael. Or Ma'aser Sheni. Ma'aser Sheni has to be brought up to Yerushalayim 2 years out of 3, except for the Shemitah year. There's a din of Ma'aser Sheni, and the and that can be used for matzah, the hegdish anivdu, or if it was matzah that belonged to hegdish and was redeemed, that even though the matzah that was made from ma'aser sheni, you have to bring it up to Yerushalayim, but he's in Yerushalayim. If he's there, he can eat it there, or if he redeemed it outside of Yerushalayim, now it's no longer ma'aser sheni, he can be yoytze. Now, same applies to Hegdish that was redeemed. You can fulfill your obligation. The Kahanim, Hayotzim Matzah, with the Chalo Ubetrumo. They get Chalo, which is the portion that has to be taken off for the Kohen, Ubetrumo. Even though they're the only ones who can eat it. And since they can eat it, they can fulfill their obligation. The Mishnah concludes, but not Tevel. Not something that hasn't been tithed, nor Ma'aser Rishon, that the Levi receives, that was not taken from it the Truma, and not Ma'aser Sheni ve'egdish lo nivdu. If they weren't redeemed, they're Ma'aser Sheni, they're not his money, and therefore he can't eat it. So the Magen Mishnah says, the Rambam explain these laws in Hilchos Brachos, and in Perek Aleph Halacha Yutes. Anyone who eats something which is osur, whether he does so willfully or unwillfully, he doesn't make a bracha, not to begin with and not at the end. He doesn't make a bracha hamoitzi nor a birchas hamozin. How? If he ate tevel, even tevel is only the rabbanon, or he ate ma'aser rishon shloinit called Umatzoh, or it was taken Trumas ma'aser but not Truma Gedolah, or ma'aser sheni ve'egdish shloinivdu, you don't make a birchas hamozin. In Halacha Chavi says, but if he ate the mai, even though it's only it's only edible. The Chacham permitted people who were poor that they didn't have to tithe it because they didn't have enough food as it was. And or Ma'aser Rishon, that they took off the Truma, even though you didn't take off Truma Gedolah, and meaning that the wheat never had an obligation of Truma Gedolah because it was given to the Levi before it was gathered together, as in the Gemara. The Ma'aser Rishon, that they took Trumas Ma'aser and they didn't take from it Ma'aser the Truma Gedolah. It's permitted to be eaten in such a fashion that the Levi took it from the stalks itself before it became obligated with Tvua in Truma Gedolah. Therefore, it's considered that when he takes off the Truma from the Ma'aser Rishon, it's fulfilled his obligation. Or Ma'aser Sheni V'Egdish, that were redeemed, even though he didn't take off the fifth. In other words, it was redeemed, semi-redeemed. The actual value is redeemed, but you have to add, when the owners redeem it, they have to add a fifth. And they didn't do so. Still, it's considered edible, and you can use it for matzah. Also, if he has matzah that he redeemed on money, if he has fruits and it's matzah sheni, and since he redeemed it, even though he didn't give a fifth, he can make a bracha before and afterwards. All of these things, you can mekayim the mitzvah of matzah as well. Now, matzah gzula, the Rambam adds, or he stole it. And now the Gemara and Magen Mishnah cites a brayso in Yerushalmi and Chalo. Matzah gzula, you can't make a bracha on it. Because it says there's a posuk in Tehillim 10:3. Somebody who makes a bracha on something he's going to eat is in a sense that denigrating Hashem. Boitzea means he's somebody who steals, and when he stole it, he made a bracha, and he is, instead of saying praise, his bracha is considered actually the opposite. Because how can you make a bracha if you're going against Torah? So the Maggid Mishnah asks a question from the Yerushalmi. We learned, when is this said? To begin with. Meaning, Al B'Soiv, at the very end, he's obligated to give him money. Thus we see that you're not yoytze b'matzah gzula, even to make a bracha on it is forbidden. So the Maggid Mishnah says, I saw somebody who learned from the Yerushalmi. B'Soiv dam muchayev loy. What is B'Soiv? Meaning, ultimately, if he acquired it, then it's his, and he only owes money. Thus we see that matzah gzula, you can fulfill your obligation with Yevid, and we're not talking about that like an esrog, which you cannot fulfill your obligation, because it says ukachtam lochem. But matzah, it doesn't say matzaschem, that it has to be yours. And therefore, by matzah, b'di'evet, if he ate it, he's yotzei. And this is what the Yerushalmi says: if he does eat it, then he's changing its composition, and therefore he's yotzei, because now all he owes is money, and therefore he fulfilled his obligation with what he ate. The Maggid Mishnah continues that from the end of the words of the Yerushalmi, it doesn't seem that we're talking about matzah gezula is yotzo, because Rabbi Yoina says there's ein avera mitzvah, and Rabbi Yossi says ein mitzvah avera. Rabbi Yoina says an avera can never be a mitzvah, and Rabbi Yossi says a mitzvah can never be an avera. V'avhilu omar ela mitzvahs. If you do it the way they're supposed to be done, they're mitzvahs. If not, they're not mitzvahs. So it would seem that even b'di'evet, somebody who eats matzah gezula, he didn't fulfill his obligation. So the Maggid Mishnah adds, if he stole wheat or flour and he made a bread, meaning a matzah, certainly yotza, because then he acquires it with a change. It's not that it's no longer here and he owes money. It became his before he ate it, and therefore he's obligated only with money, because by Gzela it says, what's the punishment for stealing? In Vayikra 5:23, you should return that which you stole, as it is. That as long as the item is in existence, you have to give that back. we learn that if you steal matzah, you have to give it back. If you ate it, you're not yotzei because you ate somebody else's matzah. However, when you steal wheat or flour and you make matzah, you acquire the wheat through the change. You made it flour. If you stole flour and you made bread, you changed it, it becomes yours. And a gazlan acquires with shinoi, it's called, with change. And he doesn't have to give back the original item because it's no longer there. And therefore, he has to pay. And so the matzah is his. The Machon Mishnah ends, so it would seem that this is the halacha. Now, Hilchos Chametz says, Rabbeinu Manoach also cites this Yerushalmi, and the Rabbeinu Manoach explains the Yerushalmi where it says this is to begin with. Now that's what it said to begin with. But at the end, Domim Uchayev Loi, B'tchila, before he eats it. In other words, on the Hamoitzi, and on Hilchos Matzah, you shouldn't make a bracha, because Matzah Gezula, you haven't eaten it yet. However, at the end, by Peirush HaMeir, you'll have to make on it, because he acquired it by eating it. Going to Rabbeinu Manoach, you didn't fulfill your obligation of Hilchos Matzah, because when he ate it, it wasn't his yet. But even Rabbeinu Manoach will admit that if he made a shinui, a flour to bread, or wheat to flour, he acquired it, and therefore you're definitely yotzei. You fulfill your obligation. Now, Bekiva get questions. Every matzah that one steals, when he eats it or chews it, why doesn't he acquire it just by chewing it? And you can make a bracha when you chew it. After it's in your mouth, you could technically make a bracha. And then he brings on the ritva that you fulfill your obligation with matzah gezula, because when you chew it, you acquire it. But even before you swallow it, just like Rabbeinu Manoach seems to say, and once you've eaten it, you definitely acquired it. The Machon Mishnah says that you're not fulfilling your obligation because it's a mitzvah haba ba'avera, and a mitzvah, and he uses the language of the Yerushalmi that a mitzvah cannot be an avera, and avera can't be in a mitzvah. The Ramach on the Rambam that if you eat matzah gezula, you're not fulfilling your obligation, says that here is proof that the Rambam it codifies the halacha that you cannot do anything, fulfill anything with mitzvah haba ba'avera, and you cannot say it has to do with lacking lochem, that it's his, because which you find by lulav, because by matzah it doesn't say matzaschem, it doesn't say his. And he asks him sukkah, that from there we see that a sukkah is an avera, it has an avera, and we don't worry about mitzvah haba ba'avera. If he pushed somebody out of his sukkah and sat in it, why matzah it is different. Furthermore, he asks the question by shofar we paskin that if you yotzei b'shofar gozel, we don't worry about mitzvah haba ba'avera. So the Machon Mishnah and the Kesef Mishnah there infer that therefore the Rambam wrote shofar agozel and luit is yotzei because the mitzvah is to hear, even if you don't touch the shofar, and therefore the person didn't touch it. So in voice there's no din of gezel. So you see the Rambam explains that shofar is different, and we can now have an answer for shofar. The Ramach himself, even though he asks these questions, cites the Mishnah Sochem 35b that you cannot fulfill your obligation by eating matzah asura by tevel. The Gemara asks pshita, obviously. So it would seem that you always worry about mitzvah haba ba'avera. Otherwise, so what if you ate tevel? We have the halacha like the Chachamim that isa chalalitza, and isa chometz can actually take place on tevel as well, even if you didn't tithe it. If you make chometz on Pesach, as a shalom, it's yours, you're over. And therefore, it was possible to say, since if you ate chometz tevel, he's over mishum bal teirul chometz, therefore he should be able to fulfill his obligation of matzah. The Ramach, as is his fashion, says, leaves it with tzorach chiyun. He's not sure. From what we see by sukkah, you fulfill your obligation with a sukkah that has an avera, and we're not concerned about mitzvah haba ba'avera. Why by matzah, the law is different. Rabbeinu Manoach cites the Gemara in Sochem 38a. We're learning Zera Shava, lechem from chalo. By chalo it says, arisoy seichem pamayim, that when you make a dough, you have to take off of it challah. And we say shel gavoya, that if it's from hegdish, since it's not his, you do not have to take off challah. And seemingly this would be the din, because if it was stolen, that you don't have to take challah because it's not yours. And also matzah gezula, that you don't fulfill your obligation. We learn this from Gzeir Shava of lechem, that has to be your matzah. Even though it doesn't say matzaschem, still it has to be his, from them, because we make Gzeir Shava lechem. Just like by matzah ma'aseh sheni, according to Meir, who's of the opinion ma'aseh sheni is moment gavoya, a person cannot fulfill his obligation of Pesach because it's not his, but rather moment gavoya. And so we see from Meir that we have this concept as well. Meir further cites that the Rae writes that matzaschem, and those women who together make in the same tanur matzahs, they have to make sure that when they take it out, they shouldn't exchange their matzahs with somebody else, and then they won't be yotze because it's not theirs. And if they don't know what they should do, everyone should say whoever receives what they receive, that's theirs. And that's a condition that therefore makes it theirs. So we find Nagor's Maimonides. He writes, the father of the Rekeach, in Siman 281 says, it's good to say whoever will receive the matzah of mine, it's his as a matona, like we find in Sukkah, that everyone brought a lulav to the Beis HaMikdash before Shabbos, or Erev Yontif, because Yontif, they couldn't bring the lulav. Because the person, if they brought it, like when they weren't allowed to bring it like Erev Shabbos, and then they had a pile of it, how did everybody know which is his? Therefore, everyone was told to say, whatever lulav you get, it's yours with matona, because the lulav is chayiv, it has to be his, because there it says, it should be yours. The Shulchan Aruch, in 454, states, the Lashon of the Rambam, that a person cannot fulfill his obligation with stolen matzah. When is this so? When he stole matzah. But if he stole wheat or flour and he made matzah, then he fulfills his obligation because he acquired it with a change. And therefore he only obligates himself with money. And the money he owes. But the mitzvah was done with something that was his. Mishnah Berurah cites the Rabbeinu Manoach that learn that from challah we see lechem, that it has to be yours. It's just like there it says your dough, so you can't be miyoytze matzah gzula. But if somebody ate borrowed matzah, you would fulfill your obligation. Only by lulav, it says l'kach lochem has to be yours the first day, but that's a different lochem. That's specific lochem. The Pesach, if you borrow matzah, you're from your friend, you're yoytze because you fulfilled your obligation. Therefore, it's considered his totally. Now, the Mishnah Berurah brings from the poskim when many bake in a tanur and they could exchange matzahs because they can't tell which is which. They should say whoever who received the matzah, that's the one who it belongs to. Otherwise, we have to worry it's a matzah gzula. He writes, furthermore, you should say so at the time that you grind it, the flour, every stage, and therefore there shouldn't be a problem, because otherwise, if he buys matzah and he takes it to his house and even though you acquire it with Mashiach, but when somebody sells it, he said that he needs the money and I can't sell it on credit, and he wants to be paid for it, and the second one says, no, I'll pay you later, that you didn't acquire it, like in Shulchan Aruch and Chodesh Mishpat, and you wouldn't fulfill your obligation of matzah. And even though that a gazan acquires when he changes the wheat to flour, the flour to bread, still regarding brocha, Ramah says that you should look into the siman Tuv Tes. Even if he acquires it, you shouldn't make a bracha, because he's still making a bracha on something that he stole, and neither the birchas of achilas matzah nor the amoitzi. Therefore, according to the Ramah, you shouldn't take matzah to be yotzeh with it. Now, from the Lashon of Mechaber, from this language, it would seem that you don't fulfill your obligation. You have to eat another piece of matzah. You have to make another brocha. To be halacha, cites Rabbi Akiva Eiger, who cites the Rebbe Dvo, that even when he stole matzah and he chewed it, he acquired it. That's a change, and therefore he would have fulfilled his obligation of the brocha. It could be that the other Rishonim say that you don't acquire with chewing, because the acquisition comes through the mitzvah itself. Therefore, it doesn't help. And even though if somebody swallowed matzah, even without chewing it, he's yotzeh. But to begin with, you have to chew it to have the taste of matzah. And he adds, furthermore, if he'll go ahead and make a brocha, when he'll eat the matzah, again, it could be you have to now worry about the ritvah, that you can't make a new brocha. And he cites that in Sefer Megineh Elef, says that you should not make a new brocha if these were the circumstances. Mora Gozel, the Bir Halacha says that from the Pri Chodesh, that since Mora is made similar to matzah, therefore, so like by matzah we say matzaschem because we have the chalo. So by Mora we also need to have your own Mora. You're not yotzeh if it was stolen. But the Shagas Arya, the Levush of the opinion that matzah gezula is possible because the mitzvah above avera, and since the obligation of Mora when there's no korban pesach is midrabanan, according to the Mechaber, if you kept a mitzvah above avera midrabanan, you yotzeh b'di'evet, so you would be yotzeh. But according to the Ramah, that even by mitzvah rabbanan and you say mitzvah above avera, you're not yotzeh. By Mora you won't fulfill your obligation. And even the second day of Yom Tov, Rabbanan, Shagas Arya says you do not fulfill your obligation with matzah gezula because it's Rabbanan, because even more because they enacted it according to the Halacha the first day, and since the first day you couldn't use it, you can't use it on the second day either.